Hello, everybody, for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing well,
Good.
well.
Excellent.
Well, we have a couple things we want to talk about today. There always seems to be a problem out there, and I guess they'll last for long. So we're going to have a job for a long time. We're going to contribute to the solutions. You know, it's a miracle if you could just to make sure you don't ever contribute to the problems.
Yes.
But we do best we can on all of this. But there's a couple of issues that I want to mention today. One has to do with the corruption in Ukraine. Can you imagine there's corruption in Ukraine?
Who would have thought?
Well, the beginning of this corruption began in 2014, and it had to do with NATO. It had to do with our militarism. It had to do with our empire, and they don't talk much about all that. But finally, it has the corruption. The philosophy is corrupt, and our intervention is corrupt and unethical and immoral, unconstitutional, and all of this getting involved and participating and encouraging this war that's going on. But now it's getting the attention of a lot of people because the old-fashioned type of corruption is getting some attention. That means there's a struggle within the system of who's getting the most money, who's ripping everybody off. So it looks like to me, Daniel, that $100 million got the attention of the people who did a little bit of investigation. I guess there was a little bit of pressure on there. But even that's peanuts compared to what they've done. I think it's billions that we're talking about has been wasted in the military-industrial complex. So I think this is important. It's good, and I think that it could have been 100% prevented. But it's 100% guaranteed once we endear ourselves to defending the empire and participating in the expansion of the empire and dealing with the military-industrial complex. You're going to the whole effort is corruption. But then you get the petty corruption. You send over billions of dollars that they have, but then there's these people come picking up the pieces, and they were stealing millions, and now they've discovered about 100 million additional waste of money. But it all falls back to why we have difficult economically in this country. And one of these days we're going to wake up and say, it's our foreign policy, folks. It's the foreign policy that encourages and demands interventionism, and it encourages people to teach generation after generation that this is a moral good. We do this because we're good people and we are doing it for peace. And I think that's a job and a half to get some people to think in a different fashion. All I can say, Daniel, is I do think that we're getting some people looking in the direction that we've been talking about, mainly because they're realizing they're running out of money.
Well, let's put that first clip up, Dr. Paul, because you told me when we were talking before the show that your first reaction was, surprise, surprise, as if we didn't know already. But this is a massive, massive scandal in Ukraine. And one of the reasons it is a massive scandal and a huge headache for DC and Europe is how close this comes to their beloved President Zelensky. This is a very, very close partner of Vladimir Zelensky called Timur Mindik. He's a businessman. Ukrainian security raided his apartment within the last couple of days. And what do they find? Bundles of cash. But he'd already left the country. This is something on Hedge. Remix News is the original source. $100 million corruption scandal rocks Ukraine. Zelensky associate flees country before police raids. And now, this isn't just some corrupt oligarch. This is Zelensky's former business partner. Put on that next picture. Here is Zelensky with Mindik. They are very close. They have been very close. And now the guy had to abscond ahead of being arrested. It's a massive scandal. And you could say that it's people that have suggested from the beginning that sending money to what has widely been known as the most corrupt country on earth, according to Transparency International and every other organization, may not have been such a good idea. We were warning about it on this program back from the very beginning. And of course, we were ignored. Biden didn't heed what we said. Don't send $100 billion of our dollars, destroy our economy for people like Mindick. And he's only one of many. So it's a massive scandal. Even The Spectator, the UK publication that's been deeply devoted to Zelensky, has put out an article. Owen Matthews wrote it saying, this could be the downfall of Zelensky.
To me, is the discrepancy on how one group of people are treated and the others a different way. So we have good American citizens, several in the Congress, several around, and people speak out and practicing their belief in the First Amendment. And it disagrees with the official position of Washington, D.C., which is always, in many, many ways, bipartisan. So they will be punished and they will be called out for it, and certainly they won't be promoted in the U.S. Congress or have any position of power. So this is a thing that all of a sudden, though, the individuals who are promoting this, who are the henchmen, who are doing our bidding. You know, Zelensky, I think he was a well-known person, but I don't think he all of a sudden did fundraisers and got, a couple dollars sent here and there. This was big stuff, and he was a pick. And how did they reward him? Because there was a knowledge then. I mean, we were doing programs in 2014. Say, watch out. There's something not right about this. So what did they do? They promote him to a high level of prestige. And he was granted more prestige by coming to the Congress on a couple of occasions to lecture the Congress and lecture the American people. You're not sending me enough money. I mean, the gall of it all and the foolishness of the American people to roll over. I can understand why the people that are in part are participating in this fraud, why they, allow this to happen. But why did the American people just roll over? And this might be just the waking up position because the war has not been successful to those who thought, oh, there's another cakewalk. And this may do some good in the sense that they better quit. But nevertheless, there's a lot of tolerance for evil. And that's, to me, is what I find disgusting.
To his credit, candidate Trump rightly criticized President Biden for sending this $100 billion. I think he exaggerated a bit, but that's just sort of how he does things. And I think he helped bring him into the presidency. I think that was hugely popular, especially with Republican voters. They were sick of sending money to Ukraine, and he rode with it. Unfortunately, what he didn't do was once he got into power, once he put the ring on his finger, he refused to cut the money pipeline off. And unfortunately, that's the case because the war would have been over. But ironically, Zelensky himself ran for president on two main platforms. Number one, cut corruption, right? And number two, make peace with the East, right before this whole thing blew up. But you talked about people being proven right, and we've talked about it many times on this show. Senator Rand Paul, remember when they were trying to send that big package? I think it was $60 billion at the time. And Senator Paul went to the floor of the Senate and said, I'm not going to vote for this. There's not even any oversight. There's not even an inspector general going to be involved like we had with Afghanistan. Remember the special inspector general for Afghan reconstruction. And remember how we talked, how he was belittled, he was attacked, he was Putin's puppet, he was a horrible person. Well, guess what, Senator Paul, you were right all along. And actually, let's listen to him on the floor back then when they were talking. I think this was July of 23, so a few months after the war started. Senator Paul went down there and said, no way, Jose. Let's put up that first video clip. I'm going to grab those. No, here he is. He's actually talking on Fox News. And he makes some great points. You might want to put your earpiece in, Dr. Paul, to get a good whiff of this. He's on the Ingram angle with Laura Ingram. Let's hear what he has.
It's $100 billion and nobody's counting the money and nobody's looking for the fraud. And Ukraine's always been in the top 10 or historically been in the top 10 for corruption. So no, I think it's a huge mistake. It's an unpopular idea. and yet the leaders in Washington are dead set on ramming this down our throat. But I told him I am not going along with it. I will not allow my consent to let them push through more money for Ukraine, particularly when they have the gall to tell us they're going to pay Ukrainian government workers while our workers go unpaid. They sent $100 billion.
That was back in
2023,
when he said, I'm not going to go along with it if they'd only listened.
Well, that is the problem. They don't want to, because the people who are really raking off the dough, and they know that a lot of this stuff is short-lived, but they always plan. I'm thinking about the special interest, the military-industrial complex, and the politicians. They know there's a limit to this, even though they might say, well, 5-10 years, we might be able to rake the coal, rake in the dough on this. So they plan it. But, and we've talked about this too, but there's another war stirring. I mean, they always have Taiwan. They can stir it up there. They could even think about invading South America. You know, they might go down there and mess around with Venezuela. So they always have something to back them up. And so the money flowing into the special interests, especially the military and industrial complex, but they also have to maintain this image of the goodness of our empire. I don't think, the administration now, they aren't in denial. Oh, no, we don't do that. We don't know. They brag about it. Oh, we just blew up some boats. Well, we don't know who's in it, but we know how many we killed. And they're taking their advice for, a senator from South Carolina. They know how to kill people.
Yeah.
And don't ask questions later.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, back to this scandal, this is a big deal because if you go to that next clip, again, this is Zelensky's deep ties with this potential fugitive. If we click that one on, in a sign that Ukraine's love affair with Zelensky may well be over, I'm sure it was over a long time ago, the Kiev Independent, which has actually always been very pro-Zelensky, detailing how deeply intertwined. Now, Mindik, who's 46, is from the city of Dnipro in central Ukraine. He's a film producer, a former business partner of Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky, who, by the way, Dr. Paul, as you know, was the moneybags for Zelensky back when he was just a humble comedian with a television show. Now back to the article. So this Mindik reportedly has links to Israel. He celebrated his birthday in Israel in September, returned to Ukraine in mid-October, then went to Israel again. According to Ukrainska Pravda's sources, Mindik is also a longtime friend of Zelensky, with whom he co-owned a production company, Cartel 95, until Zelensky transferred his stake to partners after being elected in 2019. Now, the rumor is, Dr. Paul, that he's fled to Israel, which is probably a smart move because Israel would never extradite. If he indeed has Israeli citizenship, they would never extradite him. So that's probably one of the safe places to go for him, and he may well be there. Now go to the next one. Now this is the other part that's important now, because it's the NABU, which is the anti-corruption agency, that discovered all this stuff on Mindik, right? Notably, Zelensky ran into hot water with the EU recently when he attempted to eliminate the NABU's independence, which sparked outrage in Brussels. So probably he had a whiff of what was coming, Dr. Paul, and he said, we've got to undermine these investigators. We've got to get rid of these investigators. So go to the next one. Now this is Bloomberg talking about, this is everywhere. Now that's the whole importance of this. It's massive. Why do Ukrainians fight? A $100 million graft case shows why, and this came out today, actually, and it's big news breaking everywhere. And Dagny Taggart, who's a very astute observer, by the way, I recommend her on X. I remember the times when pointing out corruption in Ukraine was called a Russian propaganda. What has been exposed is the tip of the iceberg. Now, here's the other part for Europe, Dr. Paul. So a group of high-ranking Ukrainian officials, according to Dagny, embezzled $100 million in contracts. Germany allocated an additional 40 million euros from German taxpayer funds to cover the shortfall. So talk about putting good money after bad. After this $100 million was stolen, Germany went to its own citizens and said, hey, sorry, you don't have any social services or jobs anymore. We need another $50 million, 40 million euros to send over to corrupt Ukraine.
You know, Zelensky, you might say, has been successful because this is what he wanted to do. And I keep thinking about who's going to have the last laugh. And he was able to get laughs before, and yet this is ending up badly. And maybe his laughing, his bragging and all this, along with our administration, maybe it's coming to an end. So it does. We'll have to work it in that in spite of the fact that it should have never happened, in spite of the fact that it should have never happened this long, in spite of the fact it was pure corruption, and the corruption was outlandish. I mean, it wasn't a couple million, a couple billion. This was big stuff.
Yeah, big stuff.
And maybe there will be a day that Zelensky and the others won't be able to walk away and say and laugh. But I think they believe that they can do this. I mean, I think they distort their own understanding. They come to the point where they believe they're participating in something very special. And there's a lot of people. You probably have heard of a few of their comments that's our moral responsibility. They believe that we are the peacekeepers, and I think there's a great deal of fallacy in that type of thinking.
Absolutely. Well, I saved the best for almost last, because as soon as I saw this, I thought, boom, this is Dr. Paul. This is right up his alley. And now, if you go to that next one, this is a brave Ukrainian journalist, by the way, who's been hassled a lot by the government. Put that next one up. Yeah, Diana Penchenko, excellent journalist. So they raided this guy's place, Dr. Paul, this corrupt guy, Mindik, partner of Zelensky. They raided his place. Now look what's circled. Diana writes, important, the seized cash in this guy's apartment, still in Federal Reserve packaging from Atlanta and Kansas City. It has the marks of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and Kansas City. Local law requires unpacking for state banks. This means it was stolen upon arrival in Ukraine. It never even reached the banks. So this guy, Mindik, he stole the money directly from the Fed. From the Fed.
And maybe somebody at the Fed was complicit.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. But this helps make the point I've talked about for a long time, and that is maybe we ought to audit the Fed and find out what they're doing there. How does this money go? And you've made the point many times that, the money doesn't go over to a country and say, well, we're going to give you $1 billion and you have to spend it someplace. We skip that.
Yeah.
We just send it to the company that's building the airplanes. Good for jobs, and they get away with it. But it's the fact that it doesn't get in the news. If it was in the news, now, do you think with this point that you're making here, do you think the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal will be carrying this today? Hopefully they will.
They may have to, actually, because it's that big. Big.
When it gets that big, that's when the end is nearing, and that might be the good news for the day. That this corruption. But of course, I say they all end because they all go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And this once again is showing, how the thing of it is. And when there's a crisis coming, the big bailouts and the crisis that we've seen in the last 20, 30 years, I've always argued that you don't know anything about it. But I always think about it is the credit that the Fed can use and bail out countries. I think they're involved in our foreign policy, but this is the most concrete evidence that we have, and they do it in plain old cash.
Yeah.
Pretty soon they'll be using crypto or something.
Maybe there's a love note from Jerome Powell in there. Take this and enjoy it. Well, the last picture on this topic is kind of gross, but it goes to show what Mindik was doing with all that money he stole from the Fed. Go to that next picture. Dr. Paul, I know you don't have this kind of accommodations in your house. He has a golden toilet. This guy, Mindik, a golden toilet in his house. Pretty gross, but it shows how tacky he is with our money. The second one we want to touch on really quickly, it also has to do with Senator Paul and the great state of Kentucky. And this is something that is very irritating. It should be irritating to all Americans. Yes, they want to reopen the government. The Senate voted. They had a compromise, whatever you want to call it, a cave-in. They voted to reopen it. The House is expected to vote to reopen the government today with a minibus, a partial bill to keep us open until January. But what did they do late at night? They slipped some language in, put this next one up. They just couldn't leave well enough alone because special interests rule the day in D.C. Put that next one up. This is from Fast Company. To end the shutdown, the Senate voted to destroy the hemp industry. Now, this isn't exactly accurate because this is from yesterday. It wasn't in there. They put it in afterward. Senator Paul put it in a bid to protect the hemp farmers, and it collapsed in a 76-24 vote. Now, go to the next one. Go ahead a couple. Yeah, here we go. And they blamed Senator Paul for delaying it. He says, I'm not delaying the bill. The timing had already been fixed under Senate procedure, but there's extraneous language in the package, had nothing to do with reopening the government, and would harm Kentucky's hemp farmers and small businesses. Standing up for Kentucky jobs is part of my job. So they slipped in this language to basically gut the whole hemp industry basically in the U.S. It's insane.
Yes, and they're pretending that it doesn't affect the use of marijuana, which everybody should question, and something I don't approve of. But what I don't approve of is thinking that prohibition is a good way to handle it. And just think of what this country went through on the principle of prohibition. And but I always was fascinated with that because they thought prohibition was against the Constitution, and it was avoiding the rules that we had. So they amended the Constitution. They said you can't drink alcohol.
Yeah.
Which was the principle was why they were violating other parts of the Constitution by not allowing people freedom of choice. And they did that. And of course, they had to repeal that. And one of the talks that I gave when I was leaving Congress on one of those occasions, I made a point that this prohibition and this obsession with a war on drugs, was such that it was written by people who were abusing a drug. And even today, I talk about alcohol being worse than what they claim, Venezuela is up to with fentanyl. And because I said, there's a lot more people in this auditorium, and I said that are much more protective of their alcohol. And here it is. This has a form of that. There was the pro-alcohol people that didn't want to have any hint at all to the hemp industry. But the hemp industry is a much bigger industry. It's just a plain old industry. And some people like to point out, it's not about drugs. It's about making rope and other things. That's what
Congressman Massey said. It's rope, not dope. And now it does encompass some things with the THC. And I'm not an expert. I'm not going to even pretend to try to go into the details. But apparently there are trace amounts in certain things that people consume, what have you. But this is a big step backward from the 2018 hemp bill, which legalized a lot of these, which legalized all of it, and Trump himself signed and supported. So but it's funny that you mentioned alcohol, because I've got a surprise for you. You may be shocked. It may shock you to find out that special interests rule the day, but move ahead to that last week clip if you can. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit on this one. Last week, this is from Marijuana Moment magazine, a publication. Last week, more than 50 alcohol distributors joined together to oppose efforts in Congress to ban hemp products with THC, stressing to lawmakers that as demand for alcohol has shifted downward, the cannabis market is self-sustained. But before that, there was a letter encouraging them to ban these products. So the alcohol industry is not happy to have competition. They want to ban competition, and we're seeing this. So it's a very bad move. There's very little chance, and Senator Paul and Thomas Massey talked about it, very little chance for them getting this sucked out of the bill in time for them, because there's going to be a lot of pressure to pass it by, I think, about 5, 6, 7 p.m. tonight. So it's just another example of how things work.
Well, even the vote in the Senate on Rand's amendment, It wasn't too encouraging.
It wasn't, no.
They got 24 votes, 76, to keep it as it is, regulate them, destroy an industry. It's disgusting. But to me, it's the big pictures. What should the government be doing? Telling people to do it, act voluntarily, and but they so on, and that's why I think the move with when Trump took over, that he was attacking this and doing a good job, and USAID and all these things are wonderful, but it hasn't materialized into much encouragement, because when it comes to foreign policy, we're not jumping up and down and say, go, way to go, way to go.
Yeah.
We can point out some of his positions and say, you're right. This is the way to go. And when it comes to something like this, we need a principle that the government shouldn't be telling people what they can do with their own lives. Oh, but it's risky. They're not smart. What might they do? They'll make a mistake and ruin their own lives. Yeah, what we'll do, we'll send them to Washington and let them make a decision.
Ruin everyone's lives.
And look at what happens when they get the politicians and the government involved in dealing with vaccines. Oh yeah, they can do a wonderful job, but people they don't have enough confidence or an understanding of how beneficial it is to have a system of voluntarism and recognizing other people's sovereignty, even though you might have, but you're still able. I mean, we can argue the case that the drug wars were terrible, but that doesn't for a minute, but they use it and say, oh, you guys are a bunch of druggies. They don't look at that. What we want is the freedom of choice, and if it violates somebody else's freedom of choice, then of course there should be a place to curtail and regulate people that are committing the violence. But unfortunately, the most violent unit of a human race is our governments.
Yeah,
I mean, the kids that die out in the field, they don't get together and decide they're going to have a war. But it's also, you could use as an example. Who decided on the war in Ukraine against Russia? Oh, Russia did. They invaded Ukraine. That's it. We know it. Everybody knows that's true. And everybody should know that it's not true. But that's not the case. That's why we need more people involved in, and we do have a bunch now. There's a lot of people reporting, what we consider an honest approach to understanding, our system, our economic system, our foreign policy, and the whole works. And matter of fact, I still believe our numbers are growing. But we still have to contend with a powerful Soros type of takeover that has existed and has had an influence probably for 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to close out today by thanking everyone for watching the show, and please hit that thumbs up, hit the like, share a link. If you like, you can actually share a link to friends of yours who were in favor of funding Ukraine and tell them, look what happened, guys. It didn't work out that well, as is always the case. But whatever the case, we do appreciate you watching the show. Over to you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And I, too, want to thank our viewers for tuning in today. We talked about two issues I consider very important, but it also deals with one issue, the understanding the principles of liberty, understanding what the founders thought was the very best way to do this. Never perfect, but there was an attempt to try to bring a new nation about that recognizes and emphasizes the personal liberty and responsibility. It's the responsibility that turns so many people off. Oh, you mean there would be no free food stamps for the wealthy? How are they going to make profits and hire a lot of people? No, the food stamp free ideas works for a while when the country is super wealthy and have a lot of natural resources and have a strong currency. But when that dissipates, when that changes, the whole political system changes, and it will demand a new system. And that is what's happening now in economic policy. When there's a monetary system that encourages debt and malinvestment, it gets out of hand. Eventually, the debt has to be liquidated. The malinvestment has to be removed. And that's what we're in the process of doing. But that's where the struggle is, and that's where the anger is, and that's where I am fearful fearful because I think that right now the people in charge of what the government says, in charge really the effort to promote the information for the people is biased against us. But I still am optimistic that if we have enough tools and enough people, we can spread the message of liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.